Okay, I think we'll get started. From my understanding, we have some problems going on with Zoom with some people logging on. I heard. Hopefully, we can get through that. Anyway, my name's Tom Suter. I'm the founder of the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and welcome to our Digital Transformation Summit. And the purpose of this summit is to kind of really kick off our digital transformation working group. Uh, so really excited today. It's going to be a great day. We've got a keynote. We've got a couple of panels. We're going to have a lot of Q&A. And this is the last of our 5 pillars that we've launched in the last year and a half. And I think it's one of the most important, especially as we've seen with digital transformation leading the way on the pandemic response. So anyway, thanks for our partners at Red Hat. They're partnering with us on this event. And we're going to have some great panelists and moderators. I'd like to thank them all. I know it's snowing. Despite my background, we're having a lot of snow around the area, and people are pretty busy. But thank you for joining us today. The first keynote we have is Mr. Ron Thompson, and Ron is the Chief Data Officer and Deputy Digital Transformation Officer at the Office of the Administrator over at NASA. And he's a very active member of the ATARC board. That's one of the many things I like about him. And he's going to be the chair of this working group. And it really works out well that NASA has a very big digital transformation effort that we partnered with you earlier in the fall. How are you doing today, Ron?
Pretty good, Tom. Good. Thank you for having us out today.
Great. I'm looking forward to your keynote. Thank you for coming.
Okay, so we're just going to delve right in, guys. I'm going to share my screen. Tom, let me know if you can see that. Just need positive affirmation.
We're all set. Thank you.
All right, very good. Okay, so thanks again for having us out today, Tom. This is a story that we touched upon back in the October timeframe. NASA's been involved in digital transformation. Well, I guess since inception. I think this is an agency that's very technically scientific based and looking at transformation ways of doing things since we were born. So this is an effort that really started about 2 years ago using digital as a lever, where we've done a lot of research in our methodology and how we were going to approach it. And this is our journey since then. So we started that was actually led by the Office of the Chief Technologist in partnership with the OCIO here. And around the June timeframe, our senior leadership at NASA actually appointed myself and Jill Marlowe to be the executive focal point across the agency for everything digital, and again using digital as transformation. So this is our brief story. It is not that uncommon, some of the things we're going to be touching on today, and I think there is where the areas of synergy for this working group is to share not only across other federal agencies but across the commercial space as well. So we'll just start right in. So we started by coming up with a term about defining digital. So how do we really want to define that? And really, it's really through storytelling that we can really tell the best way to explain this. And we're already seeing digital make a change in the way we work. We have sort of in this infograph here, we sort of have the traditional way of using mapping. When Garmin devices first came up, GPS devices first came up. Now we're using those capabilities in everything we do. So we're really, again, deploying digital as a lever to take a look at how we're doing things across our agency, and coming up with real world ways that we're dealing with in our personal life that we can actually implement in our working life. So you can see at the bottom, these are some of the convergence that we're seeing to accelerate, cloud, mobile, artificial intelligence, model-based everything is what we're doing, augmented virtual reality. So these are some of the things that we are really targeting upon and really get to the world where we're actually modernizing how we work. And then why are we doing this? So we see similar challenges at home and work. Tom mentioned the pandemic, and we're working in a new way right now. We're using tools that 9 months ago would just be, sort of an afterthought. So as demands from our personal life and work life actually converge, we're seeing a more complex and complicated environment that we do have to integrate. We're seeing a faster pace in working. We're seeing the changes and expectations are increasing by our younger generation coming into our workforce. So we're really looking at how we can transform NASA's work to deliver increasingly complex missions. We're seeing our commercial partnership expand. We're seeing our pace of our work, our launches we're doing within NASA increase. And then we're seeing an opportunity where we could transform our workforce. And that is, like I said, the younger generation is demanding digital right out of right out of when they're hired. They're demanding that immersive experience in doing their work. They're not looking for a manual paper-based process in order which to do things. They want it on their handheld device as much as possible, that's convenient for them when they need it and where they need it. And then we're looking to transform our workplace in the 21st century. We have a lot of our work is our observation work, our scientific and research work are done really manually in labs. So we're looking at ways to adopt a cyber presence in those labs and observations that we need to do in that scientific side of our work. So here's a success story, and this is not foreign, to other agencies and other organizations. It's really that full-time telework, that immersive experience of working in a virtual world. So where it really impacted NASA is we're able to actually onboard our new workforce during the pandemic. So we have not stopped bringing people on board during the time, and you can see these little photos are actually real folks that actually were onboarded during this time and worked to actually improve that process virtually for our onboarding. And then we're seeing our rover, our actually operations for our rovers, our Mars rovers. We're actually running those in a virtual environment at home right now. So our JPL engineers are actually working remotely, and while we'll have assets on Mars and actually running them from at home. So you see the quote from Microsoft there, and the increase of that's one particular tool, the Teams tool, increase of usage during that time. And we're seeing more and more tools outside of the collaboration tool, but more and more capabilities and those functions actually coming on board during this period. So, this is sort of the why. And what we discovered is, just doing digital for digital's sake isn't going to be successful. We really need to really explain the why to our workforce. And I touched upon these things about transforming the workforce and workplace. And these are some of the goals that we have. And it's really in our complex environment is to really come up with simplified ways in working. Our partnerships are really increasing on what's expected of those partnerships. So it isn't always, handing off a contract deliverable and then have somebody go work on something and deliver something for you in a point in time. That integrated fashion and the way we work is expected to be more immersive, more of an ecosystem in how we work. And then our workforce, again, this is where we really need to train our folks to be digital, to use data as an asset, to actually embrace and expect a world where they can actually mature from mundane routine work to higher value work. So that's in our process improvement area, where we're actually taking a look at how our manual processes work and elevating that work. And again, our workplace, this is actually developing a Internet of Things, linking buildings together, linking our scientific observations together, linking our research together. For example, our wind tunnel observations, we're really looking at ways to start to link those up to the network and observe those remotely wherever we can. And again, to be more efficient in how we're actually running the actual buildings and the physical assets. So these are the categories that we have: our workforce and workplace, and then our goals in which we need to which we intend to bring digital in across the enterprise to make that impactful experience. So these are our essential elements to here. We have what we're defining our strategic thrusts, and these are 6 areas where we have actually identified over the last 2 years during that research phase, is to see where there's opportunities and appetite across our organizations where we can align. We have our transformation architecture, and this is what we're getting ready to embrace, that activity after the first of the year. This is going to be our plan. It's going to discuss how we interoperate, the standards in which we link our systems and our work together. So this is our plan, essentially the transformation architecture, our plan. It will be integrated into our IT infrastructure through our enterprise architecture as well. So there is a direct linkage to the IT delivery side of the house. And then we have something called our grand challenges. These are cross-cutting, broad, real-world opportunities where we can find synergies among multiple parts of the organization and really make meaningful changes. A good example of this is what we're calling our future of work. That's where we're actually studying how we're working in this pandemic environment, and then what the future of how we work, where we work, when we work looks like. So that is a grand challenge that we're anchored to, and we're going to be absolutely delivering a different experience for not only our employees, but actually what we do in NASA. So we're pretty excited about that work coming forward. And then these are our thrusts that I've talked about. So we have a foundation tier that we have our data thrust. So this is taking I have multiple hats here at NASA. One is the chief data officer, but taking our FAIR principles, where we can actually liberate our data across the agency for better information awareness for our decision makers. And then our collaboration environment, where we talk to our external partners, our internal partners. Is it seamless? So right now we have different point tools, but we're really looking at that thrust to make sure we integrate all those capabilities, and we both work internal and external to the agency. And then the culture and workforce. This is probably one of the areas that is the biggest lever right now, is the culture and the ways of working. We do need to make sure it is important, and again, explain the why we're doing it, and then really to foster and embrace that digital savvy workforce coming up in the future. And these are our DT accelerants tier. This is our artificial intelligence and machine learning. This is where we're going to be using our RPA work to automate our processes. This is where we're really looking at using our algorithms to help make decisions for us quicker in a more automated way. And then our model-based everything. This is really the core of NASA, taking our engineering principles of NASA and developing models to predict certain conditions in the future. So this is something that our engineering portion of NASA is really getting behind, really looking at model-based, not only for estimations of what we're building, but also model-based project management, so model-based financing. So really looking at the what if analysis using these predictive methodologies. And then our outcome tier, and this is our process transformation. So we touched on this, is really taking a way in which we're doing things manually and bringing in automation to work faster, to work higher quality, and to work more efficiently. So that really defines our workplace, and workforce. So everything ties together through all of these thrusts, and ties together through our transformation goals and initiatives. So here are some examples really quick. I'm not going to go over all of these with you, but each of our process thrusts, we have had modest investments over the next year or two, where we will be picking pointed areas of synergy. And we have a playbook coming in for the process transformation. We have use cases for natural language processing for the artificial intelligence side to really help us predict better forecasting. So we're using that. We're using, for our Ryan program, we're using a digital twin where we can have really a digital model for what we're actually building in the real world. And then we're working on the data side for our decision lens, where we have access to data from authoritative sources, giving a look and feel into that data. And then we have an analytics platform, again, to really help bring together for the data for better decision making and providing analysis through a platform that's common, that's the definitions are used consistently across our environment. And then ATARC is really our sensitive data. So this is the crown jewels of NASA, this ATARC year data that we have. That's our sensitive classified data that we actually need to share with our partners, but we need to share it in a secure and a safe manner. So we can't have any any spillage there or any unauthorized use. And then for our culture and workforce, we're really developing ways to assess what skills our workforce has, what skills they need to have in the future. Again, using digital, digital mindset. So that's really our assessment of those skills, our plan to make sure our folks get the skills that they need. And that's really it, Tom. So these are, and I'll stop sharing right now, but these are our focal areas. And like I said, they've evolved since October a little bit more. And I am confident through this working group, our information, our thoughts, our sort of our hypothesis will change even more. So I'm excited to be involved in this. We are all in as an agency here. We have a modest but mighty team focused on this right now. So we're just here to support you and learn from each other, and really, really excited about the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. And what you didn't mention something that almost every webinar we've had is about pandemic, but I just want to, how did pandemic affect you through digital transformation? How did it focus you? Did it change much? Or, I mean, how did it really affect you?
Yeah, so for us, you may have seen in the press, we were one of the first agencies to push out fully into a remote capability. We did not really skip a beat. We were fortunate to have the foresight for our leaders. Renee Wynn was here at the time, CIO. She stood up a lot of the capabilities that we simply just eased into. We had a really good Office 365. So that's the tooling that we used in here. We had very much of a Teams environment that we went into. So we just naturally moved into that. Call it fortuitous, call it providence, or whatever word you want to describe this. We didn't miss a beat. So for us, I think honestly, we went all in. So all chips were in at that point, but we really have noticed the burnout. So we noticed also looking at our data, leave usage data, nobody was taken off. Everybody was in the work. So we really had to watch burning our workforce out, because everybody, you couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't take leave. You couldn't travel. So they were working a lot more and still continue to work a lot more. We're dealing with our use or lose, again, not like any other agency. Yeah. We really had to turn people off, was really had to temper what they were doing.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine. I heard that a lot of that across agencies. I can't even use what am I going to do with my vacation? So right. Yeah, great. Well, thank you for your insights, Ron. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.
And have a good rest of the day. And if I don't see you, have a great holiday. Okay.
Thank you, Tom.
Yep. The next one, we have Aaron Boyd. I think we need to change your tagline under you. You don't look like an Amber to me. Hey, Aaron. Aaron is the senior editor for technology and events at NextGov, and we partner with NextGov on events. I've been on their events. They partner. We follow each other on Twitter. He's a must follow. And one of the things I found most useful, Aaron, is your app. You can, everybody always asks me, why are you so informed about what's going on? I actually read all these articles. So I get your newsletter in the morning, and it's with my cup of coffee. So
Yeah,
thank you for
excellent.
doing this today. How are you doing? How are you surviving pandemic? I haven't seen you in a little while.
Yeah, it's been a bit. Doing well. Actually, our puppy just experienced snow for the first time this morning, so that's been fun. So it's been a good time over here. I would just love to echo what you and Ron were talking about at the end there, as I've teleworked on and off for the last 12 years, and the ability to shut off on the weekends and the evenings, so important. So everybody out there working through all this, take your vacations, take your time off, put the laptops away. You really got to take care of yourself that way.
Yeah, I'm going to take everybody up on that. This is our last event of about 200 since pandemic. I think we're going to have to decompress. And I know you're on the front lines because you're doing all these events too. But well, good stuff. Thank you for moderating this panel, and I'll just turn it over to you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tom. So yeah, we're going to jump right in. We've got about 40, 50-ish minutes and 4 panelists with us today. So right off the bat, I want to encourage everyone listening, if you have questions, drop them in that Q&A tab as soon as you have them. We'll try to pick them up along the way or by the end of our conversation. But if I'm not seeing stuff populated in there, I'm just going to keep talking. So if you do have questions, be sure to get them in. As we get started here, I'd like to start off by introducing our panelists. We have Kristen Geller, who is the Digital Information Specialist at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Dr. Sadia Hussein Saidia, who is Principal Systems Engineer at the Homeland Security Center for MITRE, Amber Chaudhry, who is the CX Lead at SBA, and Mitch Winans, who is a Senior Advisor for Enterprise Digitization at the IRS. So just to kick things off here, to get us started, love for each of you, just go down the line. If you could briefly introduce yourselves, what you do, what that title of yours actually means, and what that has to do with ensuring the best services provided to the citizens. Kristen, let's start off with you.
Hi. So I'm Kristen Geiler and working at HHS ASPA. I'm a management analyst, program analyst, and I'm not really sure how the title correlates to the work I do, but it's a coded, recognized in HR systems. But for the work that I've been doing recently, I think it holds true. It's focusing on our modernization efforts across HHS websites in accordance to the 21st Century IDEA Act and the USWDS standards, as well as other federal web standards that may or may not have been a priority before, but it's been a huge emphasis this year. And it's because we're implementing the HHS digital communication strategy to focus on the users and the impact that we have as an organization. And that includes establishing KPIs, doing data, department-wide data calls, really to capture the breadth of the organization's digital footprint, our expenditures, and then utilizing that data to see where our strengths are, areas of potential collaboration and weaknesses. So that's what I've been up to besides pandemic.
Yeah, right. Besides and on top of and all that. Yeah. Sadia, just before we get to you, Kristen, I wanted to stick with you for just a second. It's kind of germane to our topic, but something you mentioned right off the top, your job title and the HR codes are there appropriate job titles for people doing CX work in government? And do we need them? Are you finding that the fact that it might not line up directly is an issue that you've had to work through, or is it just something that's, another thing on your list of issues that you don't worry about?
It's an issue that I don't worry about, but I will tell you I think it has great impact across the government, especially when, you're out, and this is something that I've heard for quite some time, but people are unable to search for specific skill sets, and then the HR folks don't really know what to look at. So then you're assigning SMEs to review resumes that come in, and you may not get the expertise that you're looking for. So it's a challenge. I think it's a larger challenge that I can tell you in the 30 years of my federal service has just something that we all enjoy, just work around.
Yeah. So it's something that you'd love to see fixed, but not your top priority.
Yeah, no.
Fair enough.
We're changing HR, federal HR. I'm going to leave that one alone. I'd rather redo all the websites at HHS.
Fair enough. Sadia, who are you and what do you do?
Hi. So I've been with MITRE for over a decade. My title is Principal Systems Engineer, Multidiscipline Systems Engineer, which basically means I should be able to do everything. But what I do at MITRE is we support various government agencies. We were their federally funded research and development center. My primary job is to work with these agencies to develop the system's life cycle. So how do we design first? How do we develop the concept for a new system that they need? How do we design that system? How do we acquire that system? And how should that system operate in the field? And then when it needs to retire, how do you do that? So the entire life cycle, that's what I primarily do. And over the years, I've supported different government agencies. And right now I'm supporting the Department of Homeland Security. Specifically, today I would be talking about the support that we're providing to CBP, the Customs and Border Protection Agency. For the last 1 year, about a year or so, we're talking to them about digital engineering in the context of digital transformation of how do you engineer your systems and acquire them and deploy them using digital transformation. And that's what today I will be talking about.
Excellent. I wanted to, while we've got you up on the screen, I wanted to hit one of the questions that's already come in because you're working right now with DHS and CBP, but you have a bit more of a purview across multiple agencies versus our other panelists who are all working with a single agency. So I'd like to ask you a bit more of a broader scope question as we set the stage here. So the question from the audience here is, over the past few months, I've attended a number of modernization webinars. They all have government panelists who have been successfully transforming the enterprise. How would you approach the agencies that are reluctant to undertake modernization? How should they go about modernizing? So I feel like we could spend the entire panel on that, but just quickly as we go through the introductions here,
right?
From the other side of things, you're brought in to help modernize. What do you tell those who maybe aren't ready but need to get there?
That's a very good and important question, and something that Ron had touched upon about the workplace, and the people aspect. So whenever we are talking about transformation, people become a very important part of that discussion. And the way we go about it is, well, you can write white papers and reports and do all sorts of analysis unless you have the buy-in from your stakeholder. And by stakeholder, I mean both leadership and the people who are going to use the systems. So one of the things that I talk about with my sponsors and within my team is that it's not enough to just write reports and, you need to demonstrate how this new technology, or if we're transforming to something else, how do you demonstrate? Think about, maybe you want to pilot your efforts. Maybe you want to show with a little team of how this new piece of technology or new process would work. Everybody wants to, from top to bottom, everybody wants to see what the benefit is. If you can demonstrate that, then you have a good case in your hand.
Excellent. There were a few things you said in there that I'd love to come back to, but for now, we're going to keep going through the introductions. Amber, good to see you again. For the uninitiated, can you tell everybody who you are and what you do? Still with us here, Amber, or did I take your slot earlier, as Tom mentioned?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you are.
Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. My name is Amber Chaudhry. I'm the customer experience lead over at the Small Business Administration. So I lead the CX360 team, and we work on all things customer experience, employee experience, anything to do with the enterprise CRM, so application development, data integration. And we just recently stood up a robotics team as well. And I guess what I wanted to talk about today was the role of employee enablement in customer experience and digital transformation. And I think people should know that the number one factor in successful employee enablement is, do you have the IT tools that you need in order to do your job successfully? And so to piggyback off of the Microsoft Teams example, um, it was just making sure that we did a successful transition to that IT collaboration tool. And so earlier on in this year, we ended up doing a CX analysis on ourselves, and that was really because I started feeling like a hypocrite telling other program offices how to employ their experience, knowing that our own IT help desk was not the greatest. And so we ended up doing some research and splitting our customers into two types, so tech savvy and non-tech savvy. And what we found is that the tech savvy folks had to do a lot of one-on-one training with their staff in order to get people to use Teams. And then, of course, the non-tech savvy folks were always reaching out for, help on how to use those tools. And so it just so happens that the comms person in OCIO is on my team, and she's in charge of doing the employee experience aspect. And so the way that we rolled out this tool was completely different than the way that we usually do. And that we had data to see how much folks were adopting Teams versus still using Skype for Business, and then also seeing how many people were accessing the training tools that we were putting out there, and just a bunch of communications around that as well. And so at the end of the day, people want to feel like change is happening with them and not to them. And so we'll be using this as a huge lesson learned in terms of how we roll out some of our other digital products going forward as well.
Excellent. Are you referring to one of the questions here in the Q&A when you were talking about Teams? Great. So I'll bring that up for everyone. So this is actually working out well with the Q&A. See, you ask the questions, they get answered. We're going to do them right off the top here. So we do have another question for everybody out there. It was so many agencies are saying they are transforming digitally because they are on Office 365 and have employees on MS Teams. So that's what Amber was referring to. But the core of the question here is, what are those agencies doing to evaluate new technology outside of Microsoft? And are they taking feedback from employees on what tools they would benefit from? So rather than just focus on Microsoft, because I think this could be broadened really, how did you communicate with your employees, the employees at SBA, about the tools they were using, about the tools you wanted to give them, and about how they felt about the tools once they had them?
Yeah, so we actually use Yammer as well. And then we also have a Teams champions group on Teams. And so we used all of the channels that were available to us to kind of survey our customers on what they wanted and how they could get training. And so it was a little bit tough on our comms person because everyone wanted to originally go to her to answer their specific question. But I think through the change management and just teaching people that they could reach out to the IT help desk or the training portal has really been successful. And we've actually done this past week a survey on that transition to Teams because we finally pulled the plug on Skype for Business. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback over the process of how we've communicated and trained folks on how to use these tools. So yes, I think getting champions identified as well as surveying your customers to show them that you're listening to their needs is also a pretty critical part of that process.
Most definitely. And I think there's some more topic to drill into that. There's more to drill into on that topic there as well. But for now, let's move on to our last panelist for today. Certainly not the least though. Mitch, who are you and what do you do?
Hey, great. Thanks so much, Aaron. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Mitch Winans. I'm a senior advisor with the IRS's new Enterprise Digitalization and Case Management Office. So big thank you to you, Aaron, and everybody at ATARC for having me and being a part of this great panel with the other fantastic panelists. Apologies again that I'm not able to be on live video today. My wife actually just gave me a pandemic haircut, and I don't even get to show it off today, so I'm disappointed. But anyways, thanks for bearing with my radio voice here. But anyways, Aaron, to your question, so my role in the new Enterprise Digitalization and Case Management Office is to focus on strategic initiatives and organizational developments for our new team here. Our team's focus is really on finding ways to enhance the taxpayer experience and IRS employee experience, either through modernizing and consolidating systems, simplifying business processes, or doing whatever we can to help empower taxpayers and IRS employees to be able to rapidly resolve issues through simplified digital tools and digital environments. So from that, I kind of help us focus on the team focus on three strategic goals that we have to kind of center our concentration. The first strategic goal is to reduce the paper volume or paper intake across the IRS. And the second strategic goal is to increase our access to digital data or machine readable data at the IRS. And then the third strategic goal is to help prepare the IRS to effectively manage and leverage that digital data, particularly as we really get rolling here in the coming months and really wrap our arms around all of that data that's out there that we don't currently have meaningful access to. So from there, our team is going to be taking a test and learn approach and being very focused on what's the best combination of policy and business process and technology that can help us achieve those strategic goals and essentially create a more digitally driven or digitally enabled IRS, both for the benefit of taxpayers and for the benefit of our employees. So again, that's kind of it in a nutshell, but hopefully that was a helpful intro. So thanks for the question, Aaron.
Yeah, definitely. And got some stuff to jump off on right away with you here. One of the things, when you started talking at the beginning, it made me think that there's a bit of a chicken and egg conversation here, right? If you're trying to improve customer services, right? So the experience is part of that, but you're trying to make better citizen services out there. Do you start with fixing the services themselves, or do you start with getting better tools for the employees and then having that trickle down to better services? Is there a place, what's the chicken and egg? Where do you start with all that?
That's a great question, and it's a difficult one that we grapple with all the time. So I think bottom line, our people are our greatest asset. So I think we have several key customers, but our employees are definitely our most important customer. We need to ensure that they're empowered and enabled to do their jobs effectively. Do they have the right resources, whether they're financial resources or human resources, or do they have the right kind of policies in place, or do they have the right technology and different tools to do their jobs effectively? So I think that good customer experience and kind of strong service delivery for citizens absolutely relies on a good experience for employees, and love what some of the other panelists were saying about that. So I think it's important to kind of, when we think about CX or EX, it's really about people's perceptions of their interaction, externally, their interaction with a federal agency, or internally for employees, their perception of their interaction with their employer or with a system or with a process. So we really kind of need to think about some of those behavioral insights. For example, do the employees, think about COVID, do they feel safe? Do they feel strong and vigorous at work? Do they feel their work has meaning and purpose? Do they feel productive? Do they feel efficient? So things like that. And then that kind of translates into that positive service delivery, or more of the external CX for customers mainly being taxpayers in that sense, and then things that matter to them. Is my engagement with the agency, is it easy? Are they easy to interact with? Am I able to achieve my goal? Do I generally have an overall positive experience when I interact with that agency? So anyways, that's a great question, Aaron, and hopefully that kind of shed a little bit of light on how employee experience impacts good customer experience.
Yeah, definitely a good way to kick off the meat of our conversation here. So what I'm going to do from here is I've got a few things that I want to make sure we chat about. I'll be directing those questions at individual panelists, but I encourage all of you on the panel here, jump in whenever you have something to say. Feel free to ask questions of each other and the like and all that. We're already getting more questions in the Q&A as well, so I'll start rolling those out as we go along. But to kick us off here, I'd like to just keep going on what we were talking about at the end there with Mitch, the chicken and egg. He was saying you really got to start with the employees before you can worry about the citizens. Just opening it up to the panel, Sadia, I'll go to you first. What do you think of that? Is there a framework that MITRE uses, or some kind of customer experience continuum that solves the chicken and egg problem? Sadia, you still on mute?
I'm sorry.
No problem.
Oh, that's okay. I do it all the time.
Yep.
Yeah, the whole, getting used to your interface.
It's a big part of the experience, right?
It's a big part of the experience. Yes, I think some of us already talked about how
Mhm.
important it is to get the users involved in the whole decision-making process. As a systems engineer, that is a very important part, as we develop systems, as we test these systems, have we gotten the requirements correct? Are the users being able to use it and efficiently use it? Not just doing a rollout of a new IT system or a product just because it has to be modernized is not the right way to go. So it has to be a little iterative process where we get what our sponsors or our customers want, and then we do our engineering, build a little, test a little,
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, those are some of my thoughts. Those are some of the things that I would do.
Mhm. Excellent. I want to continue this thread and kind of just push it forward. Amber, something you said while we were chatting during your intro made me think of when's the right time to cut bait on a new tool or some sort of service improvement, right? You're working with your internal customers, the employees, or your external customers, the citizens, and there's all this change management, right? You're just trying to get them used to the tools, like Mitch and Sadia were saying. But at what point do you say, you know what, nobody's liking this, nobody's getting used to this, we got to change?
That's such a tough decision. I think once it starts going to the hill and your senior leadership is probably a good indication that you need to do something. And even still, I think we're changing our processes and working with our enterprise architect so that usability testing is done throughout the process. And so that we're not really dealing with some of this poor experience issues once we roll out a product, right? And so baking that into the process is pretty critical. And I think there's a lot of hesitation around doing some of that usability testing still. And so people think it's a lot of work, that they have to go through the Paperwork Reduction Act process, but it really pays off in the long end because it saves us money from not doing rework at the end of the day. And so I would just say work with your business folks or your enterprise architect to make sure that all of your agile teams are actually agile in doing that usability testing.
So if I'm hearing you right, the idea is if you're doing your development process and you're really bringing in users and all that stuff, you'll never get to that fish or cut bait question because you'll be fixing it all along and making it something they can use. Is that right?
Absolutely. And the great thing about customer experience is that it's inherently agile.
Mm-hmm.
And so making sure that you're co-creating and problem framing with your customers and also bringing them along in the journey by inviting them in to do usability testing is something that is pretty rare. Still, I know it happens in pockets as well, but still changing the culture in government to make sure that's done throughout the process is something we should all be working towards.
Yeah, definitely. Kristen, I wanted to get your thoughts on this whole conversation as well, especially because off the top, you talked about data calls and KPIs. So I'd like to mix in two things there. One, what's the kind of data that you're looking for to determine if customers are satisfied? Is it just like at TSA? I remember they put in the smiley face and the frowny face kiosks at the airports, right? Like, so that's an obvious one like that. What are some maybe less obvious data points that you look for and you try to pull to get an understanding of how people are using your services and whether they're enjoying them?
Right. So coming to determining the KPIs was definitely a challenge, and they were part of our strategy. We've gone back and forth. Yes, positive ratings for usability, usability scores, is essential. Like we were really happy. We got the plain language award this year. We got an A. So during
Fantastic.
COVID, so that was fantastic. But I think some other metrics that we've gathered, and it's changing, right? But we were kind of looking at satisfaction. How long did it take for people? Did they find the information they needed? We have a lot of satisfaction survey tools throughout the government, or HHS, and specifically, and we've been trying to figure out if there was some capability of taking, because they're different products, right? And taking the information and overlaying, like crosswalking that data. Is there a standard question that we could ask for public information? But for us, we're looking at just some basic data currently for our KPIs, and that had to do with page views, which is an old-fashioned one, but we're still, but you're getting to see actually who stayed on the page, the search terms. So that was some of the KPI establishments. For us, the data calls, you're going to think this is crazy, but we're a huge organization, and part of the digital strategy was actually taking a comprehensive inventory of what we had, what websites, what social media accounts were there, and then doing some deeper dive investigation on, I guess, correlating it to as well to the IDEA Act, right? So you've had your modernization efforts, your score from 2019 when it was first implemented. Did you digitize the forms? There's branding, redundant content, mobile. I think there's 8 categories. If anyone's interested, it's on IDEA Act. But that was really the main emphasis. We also did some budgetary data calls, trying to figure out how much people were spending. And that way, if there's overlap, to speak to the first question that was asked about modernization, there are people, and we have large and small optives at HHS. So some are reluctant. They don't have the money, or they don't feel that they have the time. And I think showing that we can make the changes incrementally, modernizing as a phased approach, and through education is an approach that we are focusing on, doing collaboration. So I hope I answered your question.
You did. And not only that, you started getting at one of the questions in the Q&A. So what I'd like to do is just ask that one if you wanted to follow up with any additional, and then open it up to the rest of the panel for their thoughts on this as well. Someone from the audience asked, what are some areas and digital KPIs that measure the success of the customer experience changes delivered through digital transformation efforts? So part of what you had already talked about, right, was some of those KPIs for just finding out what the experience is at any given time, right? Do you have specific ones that you would like to share for measuring the success of your specific efforts? When you make a change, how do you measure if that was a positive change or not?
So didn't let you in on a project that we're currently working on. It's developing that scale to almost to measure people's success, right? So it's going to be a culmination of data sets, right? So let's just say you have great page views. You've only spent, X amount of dollars, but your outreach, or people only come onto your page and they're there for a second, and your search functionalities, you've tanked it on the IDEA Act scores. So there's going to be a scale, and it's going to be almost self-ranking we're going to allow organizations, but we're determining that scale now. I can tell you that we have a lot of documentation out for review, and hopefully we can come upon an agreed scale, so that offices can take the information, kind of take the formula and come up with their ranking. That way you're not getting a naughty score. It's a score to help you. And again, that's one of the big emphasis for us, that we're not doing this modernization or to call anybody out. I think that's, we're really focusing on, like, let us help you make yourself even better. So self-improve.
Yeah, shaming people doesn't get them to change, right? So that's not going to help anybody. Sounds like you're developing almost like a FITARA scorecard, but for CX improvements, because I hear a lot of same language out of the FITARA people, right? This isn't a scarlet letter, as Jerry Connolly would say, right? This is about determining where you're at so you can move forward.
Yes.
Fantastic. So love to just open it up to the rest of the panel on this same one. What are some of the KPIs, the data points that you all are using, the techniques you all are using to determine the success of your efforts?
So I could talk a little bit about that because that's somewhere that even we are working with our sponsors right now, is developing those metrics. And some of the metrics that we're talking about are in terms of time saved, cost savings, and less rework. And what we're dealing with right now is how do we better conceptualize these metrics to have a balanced scorecard in terms of qualitative and quantitative metrics. Because some things that are related to time saving and cost saving are more quantitative, more hard data, but less rework, or how did you feel about this particular technology or this new process. That's more soft. So how do we get to that? How do we derive that kind of metrics and convert those qualitative metrics into quantitative metrics is some of the things that we are thinking about and trying to make sure that we don't lose out any of those subjective assessment metrics.
Yeah, that's incredibly important, I imagine. Have you made any headway in that? Do you have a timeline? Are you putting out is MITRE putting out some kind of framework or something that could help agencies with that? Because I see that as not an intractable problem, but such a deep one that any advice you can give on what you found so far would be helpful.
Sure. So what I'm doing right now is, in order to answer this question for our specific sponsors, reaching out within MITRE and reading a lot of research work that has been done in this area to support other government organizations. But we really have to tailor all that research specifically to our sponsors space, right? But the good thing is the methodology for doing something, quantifying these qualitative aspects has already been done. It is nothing new. It's just how do you tailor it? And what we're trying to do is develop these metrics for CBP first, and then see how we can up-level it at the DHS level. So since CBP is just one of the components of DHS, how do we take it up to the DHS level and see how that works over there? So yeah.
But to your point that everybody's a little bit different, and CBP, I end up covering them quite a bit on the technology side. They have such a very specific and narrow mission. How much of what you do you think can translate DHS wide, and how much of it has to be tailored to specific agencies, missions, and offices?
In terms of the engineering process, it's not very different. You know, how we develop systems, how do we, go from one phase to another, that remains the same. The difference comes in at the operation phase for all of these different components. So, CBP, customs, even just doing the customs part is different from border protection part. So they may be looking at similar kinds of threats, but it is different, and the operations are different. The officers are looking at different kinds of problems and threats. So So at a higher level, we would be creating something that talks to all these metrics. But you're right, when it comes down to the lower levels at the field officers, um, when it comes down to that level, then every agency or even the divisions within that agency would have to tweak it.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Amber, Mitch, did you want to, either of you want to weigh in on indicators of success, or should we move on to the next?
Sure. This is Mitch. Thanks, Aaron. It's a great question and great feedback from some of the other panelists. So, yeah, I think the example for us at the IRS is the very nature of the creation of our new Enterprise Digitalization and Case Management Office. There are several influential factors in the stand-up of the office, but one of them was requests or frustrations that were heard directly from taxpayers or from a tax services community. So we intentionally always reach out to taxpayers and ask for their feedback, whether it's through surveys or focus groups or interviews. Pre-COVID, there is even opportunity for in-person observations at taxpayer assistance centers and looking at the throughput and the experience there. Anyways, when you're thinking about kind of omni-channel CX, but beyond that, there's also some specific things related to the IRS and other agencies. The IRS has the Taxpayer First Act was a piece of legislation that was signed into law in 2019. That focuses directly on how can the IRS improve the taxpayer experience and how what are the different levers within the IRS that need to be pushed and pulled to make those improvements happen. Also, more broadly, the OMB Circular A11, that Section 280 guidance on customer experience, and there's some specific requirements in there for agencies like the IRS that are a high impact service provider to be able to get specific feedback from taxpayers from some of those specific categories of customers. So also, beyond that, kind of the irony of this is, of course, we need to look at people and processes and technology to improve CX and EX. But the irony of it is really looking at some of these emerging technologies like AI and automation that can really help us improve our feedback mechanisms or the accessibility for citizens to be able to ask questions or share feedback with a federal agency. So kind of the irony, I know earlier you even talked about kind of chicken before the egg, but kind of looking at, is a technology a cure-all for improving CX or EX? No, certainly not, but it does need to be a key part of the equation when you think about tools like natural language processing or chatbots, tools that can maybe make it easier or more simple or more rapid for a citizen to be able to ask a question or share feedback with an agency about a particular process or about a particular form that they need to provide to fulfill their obligation or achieve their goal with that agency. So, anyways, kind of bottom line as far as, we look at quantitative and qualitative measures, and it's important to kind of have that balanced scorecard in terms of KPIs. But the bottom line is that measure of success for a CX initiative, it shouldn't necessarily be perfection. The measure of success should be, does the new method outperform the old method? And then what are we learning at each iteration so we continue to improve?
Yeah, it's funny. You went from chicken and egg to nesting dolls, like getting better technology to improve the technology used by employees to improve the technology used by the citizens.
Exactly. Sounds so simple, right?
So, Amber, did you want to add anything to this before we move on, especially any of the unique or interesting indicators you all use at SBA?
Yeah, I think Mitch covered it, but we'll echo the Google Analytics, the operational data that you all should have so far. So saying how long it takes them to complete a task, whether it's finishing an application, but that A11 Section 280 voice of the customer data is especially important, given that one of the questions is, did this interaction increase your trust in government? And I think the interesting part about that is no matter what part of the aisle that you're on, trust in government is at an all-time low. And so being able to see a before and after difference in that satisfaction and trust question will help you measure the success of your customer experience initiative.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that. That has trust as an indicator. That's just a great one. Going to go to another audience question here. And Kristen, I think I'm going to throw this one to you first again, and then open it up to everyone. How is digital transformation different from older process involvement concepts, continuous improvement, business process reengineering, et cetera? Is it just that we have newer and broader set of technologies available? And just around that question, I just like to add, I love this question because when we're talking about digital transformation, we're talking about customer experience, we're talking about anything in government, these things so quickly become buzzwords and you can lose meaning. So I'd love it if all of you could just talk a bit about how digital transformation as a term is different than what you've done in the past. Or is it?
This is my 2 cents. I think digital transformation takes lessons learned from those older processes and utilizes them, but the focus is on, it might be an electronic business process, but because it's a digital process, it takes on there's other things factors to consideration. It's not just like a business process. I had a form, I had to print it, fill it out, and I'll even say like fax it to the other office. But now everything's digitized. It's getting away from paper, whether you're incorporating AI functionality, right? You have blockchain, or you're just doing digital signatures. There's various elements in a digital process, workflows, security, Privacy Act, records management. And they all kind of have to be integrated. So it's taking, in my opinion, it's taking those older processes and kind of folding them up into digital transformation. And that would be my description.
Sure.
For that.
Opening up to everybody else, do you differentiate between digital transformation and other forms of customer experience or general process improvements? Is there a difference, or is this just now doing some of the same things we used to do, but in a digital realm?
Can I take that really quickly? Yeah. And I think that a lot of the times people come to our team, the business technology solutions team, to figure out how to solve a business problem. And that's not what we want. We don't want to solve your business problem through technology. We want you to figure out your business process first and then come to us, whether or not you want to do some supplemental CX analysis around that before we get to that digital piece. I think is so important, because I think a lot of the times people just want us to solve everything, and that's not what we're here for. I would be interested in what some of the other panelists have to say as well.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna.
Sure, this is.
Yeah, Mitch.
Sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
I was going to ask you to jump in, but I wanted to direct it to you slightly differently based on what Amber was saying. You mentioned before that it's a combo of policy, business, and technology, right? And Amber was saying, if you don't have your business really figured out first, it's going to be hard to start. So how do you think about that? What needs to be done first is do you need to have the policies in place? Is that something you can work on as you go? Do you need to have your business case figured out first? How does the 3 legs of the stool, how do you prioritize those things?
Yeah, great question. It's hard to figure out where to start. And kind of my philosophy is always to start small, think big, and iterate often. So I think that looking at an agency like IRS and some of the other agencies that are represented on the panel today, the IRS is a target-rich environment for this type of stuff, right? There's a lot of opportunity to look at legacy policies, legacy forms, legacy business processes, legacy technologies. How can we consolidate or modernize things to do our jobs better and improve experiences for taxpayers and for our employees? So one way that we try to break it down in our new IRS Enterprise Digitalization and Case Management Office is to kind of look at some of the different terms that are out there. So I think of number one, when we think about digitization and digitizing things, when we look at that, we're talking about converting paper analog information that the IRS has into a digital format so we can get machine readable data. So for example, the NAR requirement, National Archives and Records Administration requirement, that they're no longer going to accept paper records after the end of 2022.
Wow.
So we have about 2 years left to convert all those permanent records into digital format and to no longer collect paper records. So at the IRS, I can think of specifically, I think we have 1,400 different forms total at the IRS. And I think 2 of those forms make up about 400,000 boxes that are currently stored in caves in different parts of the country, basically just storage facilities. So from a policy standpoint, back to your question, Aaron, can we look at the legacy policy that requires us to store those 2 forms that make up 400,000 boxes of documents that are stored in caves? Is it a statutory requirement, or is it an internal policy? Okay, and if it's, for example, is it currently a 75-year retention period? Can we look at reducing that retention period? What about 45 years, maybe 25 years? What do we do with the existing paper? Can we convert it to a digital format? Things like that. Taking another step further, kind of the second area, looking at digitalization, and kind of sounds similar but a little bit different. I know there's a lot of technical distinctions, but that is less about converting the paper analog info into a digital format, and it's more about changing paper-based processes or mail-based processes into a digital process. So we kind of think about that guiding principle at IRS of digital first, or how can we go digital by default? I think that's where the really big impact is can we convert paper-based or mail-based processes for submitting information or submitting financial resources or a check? Can we make that digital? And again, can we make digital the rule and not the exception? Of course, there's going to be certain scenarios where we still need to have paper or mail-based or call-based processes, but really looking at making digital the rule, not the exception, will increase accessibility and improve experiences for customers and taxpayers. So, and that last part, kind of the digital transformation that you were mentioning, I think that's where you kind of bring everything together and you kind of have those seamless digital tools or those suite of digital tools that create more digital environments where it's very easy for a taxpayer or citizen or whatever other customers a federal agency has to be able to engage with that federal agency system or their ecosystem. And that's where, again, I kind of think about things like chatbots, where somebody can ask a question in plain language and kind of get a direct response and kind of get that, whether it's informational type of guidance or a transactional type of guidance, or maybe even more of that advisory or customized advice to help them achieve their goal and have a positive way. So anyways, there's a few different elements related to your question, but hopefully that kind of shed light on how we view things at the IRS so far.
Definitely. And we have just ticked over. We got about 2 minutes left. So Sadia, I'm going to ask you to take us out. And as you do, talking about the same topic, could you also just talk a little bit about how important the digital side of this is? When you go into an agency to help them, like CBP, to help them improve their CX, how focused are you on digitization and technology versus the other things?
Sure. I think before the technology comes the process. So that's how we're tackling it. We need to explain and lay out a process of how would you do this? How would you go towards digital transformation? What tools and platforms you would be utilizing to do what tasks? It needs to be laid out first. Because what we've been noticing is that, all right, we're not paper-based anymore. We do use Word documents to develop our documents and concepts, and we use Excel files and all other various MBSE tools, etc. But where the inefficiency comes is from how these different platforms are not interconnected. And I think someone talked about the digital environment or the digital ecosystem. That is the bottom line of digital transformation. We're trying to have all our work streamlined, of course, but integrated to be able to do your end-to-end process. So whether you're at the concept phase or writing requirements or testing, you should be able to access the data elements that are necessary for you to do the work at a single place. So we don't want to have an automated chaos by creating different logins for different platforms. Taking that to have a single source of truth or single source of authoritative truth. That is something that's forming the point of how we're going about doing digital transformation and digital engineering for CBP.
And you just gave me a whole nother rabbit hole to fall down. Unfortunately, we're out of time. No, it was great. It was great. But for now, I'm going to throw it back to our host at ATARC. And as I do, please, everyone, join me in thanking our panelists. Maybe throw some claps in the chat for everybody. Tom, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Thanks for making me the bad guy for cutting off this great conversation. Wow. No, it was great. Thank you. Thank you for that. That was interesting. I almost forgot to get logged back online. But thank you for that, and have a great holiday, my friend.
Thank you. You too, sir.
Great. So next we have a tech talk, and we are. Hang on, let me get to my right place here. I got a little messed up here. So anyway, we have with us Michael Ducey, and Michael, I don't know if you remember, the last time we saw each other was the last physical event that ATARC had. And I don't know if that was the last business trip you came out of. You're out of Columbus, right?
Yeah, I'm out of Columbus, and that was the last business trip that I took. And I remember I was going to head to the office the following day, and I decided just to stay in the hotel room, and it was best to isolate myself at that point.
Yeah, so for those of you on, the last event that we had was on a Tuesday. Just imagine yourself pandemic week. It's Tuesday, and we had 300 people at our DevSecOps Summit, and Michael spoke at it, and everybody was fist bumping and elbows, and it was like normal. Nobody said they were canceling because of COVID. And then Wednesdays, when the president addressed the nation, said we're going to go under lockdowns, and it's going bad quick. Thursday morning, if you can picture that, most folks had a family member at Costco or Wegmans at 6 a.m. in the morning. So we managed to get that in under the wire. And I think you had just started at Red Hat, as I recall.
Yeah, I had just started at Red Hat a few months before, and unfortunately now the majority of my time at Red Hat has been under this new normal, as we call it.
Well, I remember your presentation. I thought it was fantastic, and I'm really interested to see what you guys are what your transformation story is and what you see across industry and government. Really looking forward to your perspectives. Thank you for coming today.
Sure, thanks so much for having me. So I'm going to talk today about, and of course, as a lot of you have noticed, I'm actually in the offices of the FBI. As you can see, it's a very special branch that they have. You might recognize this scene if you ever watched a little show called The X-Files. So today I'm going to talk about the trusted software supply chain. And I'm going to talk about it in the context of how we reduce risk while we can still drive change. And then at the end, I'll give you an example of a trusted software supply chain that Red Hat has built specifically for DoD. As said earlier, I'm Michael Ducey. I'm a transformation specialist at Red Hat. There's my Twitter handle if you want to reach out to me and ask me questions afterwards as well. So let's define what the trusted software supply chain is first. So it's really this idea of an enforced set of sequences or processes involved in the deployment and development of software. And the easiest way that we can think about this is a continuous delivery pipeline. But it really takes this idea of continuous delivery pipeline one step further in that we don't necessarily think of the steps that you go through in the continuous delivery pipeline as tests, but rather in the trusted software supply chain, we think of them as gates, and gates that are all about enforcing governance, risk, and compliance in that deployment. The other way to look at it is it's really this idea of being able to, trying to enforce these rules to enable development teams to move fast, and also to enforce the behavior changes needed to adopt a culture of DevSecOps. And really what I think, if you look at from a trusted software supply chain perspective, it becomes the contract of the way that you work. And I'll explain that here a little bit further. But the important thing to understand is that this trusted software supply chain is part of this system. And if you look at this broader system, you have product who gets the hypothesis or gets feedback from end users about what new features to add or what things that need to get fixed. Product comes up with a hypothesis of how to achieve that. They ship it over to development. Development actually does the coding. They go through the process of deployment. Operations gets it out and uses, development and product might use agile software development methods. Development and operations might use something like DevOps to get the deployment actually out. And then operations, once it's in production, is using something like site reliability engineering to make sure that there's a high degree of reliability and when you're running the application. And then this just becomes a virtuous cycle in that the customer then provides more feedback, product creates that hypothesis, we do development, we do operations, and it just repeats itself over and over and over again. And I think the important thing about this is that that idea of modern application delivery or modern application deployment is a socio-technological system. And so thus the trusted software supply chain is this combination, which we've talked about for years, of people, process, and technology, and the overlap between those. But the other thing that I like to think about when we look at this diagram is that there's contracts that are created. So there's a contract between product and development that they're going to work on an agile, maybe a safe methodology, and they're going to do agile software deployment leveraging safe. And then from development and operations, there also needs to be some sort of a contract. And then there's a contract between operations and the customer, maybe more towards operations and the business or the line of business that you're actually serving or the agency that you're serving, of what the reliability for the application is going to be. So it's important to understand that there's contracts, and these contracts, of course, have people. And then how do we get people to move towards this new way of working? And it is through this idea of enforcing behaviors. We've talked about this in the world of DevOps for some time, and we talk about this wall of confusion. And this, when we don't have strong contracts, you have this wall that makes it very, very hard to rapidly deploy software. And so what you really want is this idea of platform as an interface. And we think of things like Kubernetes and APIs and our continuous delivery pipeline as a way to interface in with a very strict contract about how you can deploy software. And the trusted software supply chain is all about enforcing this socio-technological contract that we have around the gates that are going to be needed, the risk profile for a certain application and how much testing will need to go into it, what security tools will need to be run based upon the risk profile of the application, and codifying that in a way that can be repeated over and over and over again every single time a developer wants to ship code to production. And so the trusted software supply chain is really about making adoption scale at reality. So, enabling developers by providing configured testing tools to developers as part of their development stack. So having everything that they need to do the testing locally on their laptop and having that integrated development environment if needed. Being able to help developers move fast or accelerate what they can ship. And so that's integrating testing and security tooling into the development pipeline to make automation a thing, and automated testing and automatic gates be something that they can't easily get around. And then it's really about enforcing. So it's configuring and integrating your security and compliance gates to enforce the governance, risk, and compliance requirements given an application's profile. And I think this is the important thing, is when you have this repeatable method that the trusted software supply chain allows you to do, you can look at each application and then you can begin to bucket your applications depending upon the risk profile. A low risk application maybe not needing as much testing, whereas a high risk application where it's touching a lot of sensitive data might have much stricter requirements, or for something that might be running a weapon system, having software or hardware emulators and things like that as well, to make sure that the application is going to behave the way that you expect. And so it's really about doing the right thing, making it easy, and then do it by default always, and having that enforcement being something that's not easily opted out of. And if we do need to opt out some of the things that we are enforcing, then we can start to catalog those exceptions. And so one interesting thing is that, as we went through DevOps for a long time now, it's going on about 12 years, I would guess at this point. And the State of DevOps Report 2019 kind of showed the difference between the elite performers and the low performers. So elite performers being able to do, n number of changes per day, an exponential number of changes per day, whereas low performers only having to change 1 to every 6 months. The lead time to change being less than a day to 1 to 6 months. The mean time to recovery being less than an hour to a low performer being a week to a month. and the change failure rate being somewhere between 0 to 15% for elite performers to 46 to 60% for low performers. And this, of course, is from the 2019 State of DevOps report, but this research has been going on for a number of years, over 6 years now, with 31,000 survey responses. And the thing that you can really take from this is automated changes. So having this strong trusted software supply chain is the enabler to allow you to have higher throughput and stability when you're doing your software deployments. For a lot of the requirements and checkboxes that you have to automate them, because just the number of application changes that you want to make. The thing that slows it down is all of the testing and all of the compliance that you have to do. And if you don't automate that, then there's no way that you're going to be able to deploy at this high rate of change. And so when we talk about the trusted software supply chain, we are essentially just talking about a continuous delivery pipeline, but taking that continuous delivery pipeline one step further and really understanding from having those trusted code repositories that development is not only pulling their dependencies from, but also pulling their code from, development making those changes and walking it through this process of doing unit testing, code quality, security scanning, testing, and so forth. And then also being able to go back to make sure that you're actually making sure that the governance and risk are met, to actually make sure that the change control board approves those changes, and also the authority to operate is still continue to be met. So I'm kind of coming against time here, so I just want to jump ahead. This is an implementation that we've done of a trusted software supply chain that implements the DevSecOps reference design for the DoD. And we call this Project Red Sword. It's 100% open source, and it's available on GitHub. And it's built upon our OpenShift platform. And really what it's about is bringing in trusted infrastructure supply chain. So all about how do you actually deploy the infrastructure that's needed, doing it in an infrastructure as code method, and then building upon that the trusted software supply chain so that you can have pipelines integrated and built very quickly. The trusted infrastructure supply chain also stands up all of those things that you see at that middle layer around logging, monitoring, single sign-on, service mesh, and so forth for particular applications as well. And the way this kind of looks, if you look at the DoD Enterprise DevSecOps reference, you can kind of see how they've defined how the application and the software factory fits on top of the DoD cloud. And then, of course, using DevOps services, container services, and operations services. And this is really where we've mapped this into the OpenShift platform and how you can run this on top of OpenShift as well, and how even platforms such as Kubernetes allow for these DevSecOps reference implementations to be easily built. And it's really about enforcing these contracts and this idea that technology enables the behavior changes, and behavior enables technology, and you start to consume this technology. And it's also all about having that strong contract between development and operations and understanding how they work between one another. And that trusted software supply chain becomes the way that development and operations begin to work with each other on a day-to-day basis. So thank you very much. With that, happy to take any questions, but I know we're kind of over time.
No, I got one for you. I know you've got a lot of experience in government, but you also have some in the commercial industry. What are the biggest? How would you compare and contrast, just real quickly, the government and private industry?
Yeah, I think the biggest change for me, coming from commercial, is that the mission is different. So for a retailer, you're very worried about return on investment. You're very much about turning a profit, and if I'm down for 3 minutes on my website, I've lost $3 million or whatever it might be. For government agencies, the mission is much different. Yes, there is this toll that's on you if the website is down, but it's all about delivering to citizens and making sure that the return on investment isn't necessarily shareholders, but your taxpayers. Yeah. Having to justify a lot of times to Congress as well why a particular agency is doing something. And then the other thing that I would find is that the large number of system integrators, where a system integrator might have a contract for development and another one has a contract for operations.
Right.
The contract vehicles are not set up to enable DevSecOps. And I think that's one thing that we have a lot of change that needs to take place in the industry.
Great. No, thanks. That's a great perspective, and we appreciate your time. So that's Michael Ducey. He's a transformation specialist over at Red Hat, and thank you for that. Next up, we have Jory Heckman, who is a reporter over at Fed News Network. I almost say radio every time, Jory. I know it's been about 3 years since you made the transformation, but I'm like, you know, the guy that still calls them the San Diego Chargers, the Baltimore Colts. So I keep saying that. How are you doing today? We're having a little trouble with your audio. Hang on. All right. Yeah, we're just having a little problem with it. Okay. Of course, Jory, you can follow him on Twitter. You can follow his articles. He's a reporter's reporter. And there's been a lot of news around the Beltway lately. So hopefully we can get this little difficulty figured out here. As you all know, this is the kind of thing that happens when we do this. Yeah, I think he's
Tom, how about now? Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you beautifully. So anyway, how are you doing today? Are you good? Can you hear me? I can hear you.
1 second.
Okay, here you go. All right, we'll get him here in a second. Okay. We'll get him here in just a minute. Maybe everybody else can come on real quick, and so we can hit this panel running. We'll get Jory back in a second.
Oh, here I am. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can
Sorry
hear you now.
about that.
I pulled your panel up. I was trying to pull your panel up. I can hear you beautifully.
Yeah, sorry about that. I guess we're all rolling with the punches these days, and is a prime example of that. But Tom, thanks for vamping for me, and panelists, thanks for hanging in there for just a moment here. We have a great topic, and we have a great line of panelists to walk us through workforce transformation in the time of COVID-19. There's, by now you've surely heard, whether from ATARC or some other outlets of just the seismic transformations agencies have had to make in what's now, I believe, 9 months for this new normal. And we're going to walk through some of that and just taking it to the next step of looking perhaps what's going to stick around and what new insights have been made available here with this new situation here. And so without any further ado, I am going to introduce my panelists in a second. By all means, please keep the questions rolling in here as we go along. I don't want to just wait until the end here for answering questions, and we've been doing a good job of that so far. So I'll give a quick introduction to the panelists. They can fill in some of the gaps that I may be missing here. But I want to introduce Robin Reese, Senior Advisor in the Office of Human Capital at the Department of the Interior. Ron Thompson, you may remember him from just a moment ago with over at NASA. He's their Chief Data Officer and Deputy Digital Transformation Officer. Jan Smith, Manager for Recruitment and Retention over at FAA. And I really hope you remember this panelist, Michael Ducey, who just spoke a moment ago, Transformation Specialist over at Red Hat. And so everyone, thank you so much for taking the time. I want to start the conversation here by just addressing something that's pretty straightforward, but worth going through nonetheless. Pretty broad topic here, but what does digital transformation look like for your agency, and how does this transformation impact the workforce? That can be as much or as little about the pandemic as you want. I think a good place to start there would just be with Robin. Let's hear from you and what's going on over at Interior.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Can you all hear me? Get a thumbs up? All right. This is the new way that the teachers for my kids in virtual school understand if everybody's following along. So I'm taking some tips from our educators. I'm really glad to be here. I think it's a great question. I'm hoping that as I'm able to share some of my thoughts, that perhaps I can spark additional interest in a shared vision for a digital workforce transformation. When I think about a digital workforce transformation, my background coming into this is as an IT management professional working in the space of budget, governance, strategy, contracting in the federal government, everything but human resources, right? But I'm here in human resources because that's where the data that enables the workforce to continually be effective lives, right? And if the workforce is effective, then obviously mission leaders are effective as well. And so when I think about digital workforce transformation, I try to think about it from the notion of a resiliency space where what we're building in our workforce is this notion of being adaptable, never more so than in the time of COVID when the fire hit our doorstep, but adapting to the new way we carry out the same work we've always done, right? If I look forward 5-10 years from now, I might imagine that I'm doing the same types of work, but I might be doing that with new tools. And I need to always be ready to learn those new tools. And I need some mechanisms in place that help me see forward a little bit into what I might need to know so that I can prepare for those new ways of carrying out the work and be capable in what I like to refer to as ever ready. I'll let others jump in if there's more to say there.
Excellent. Thank you, Robin. And Jan, turning it over to you. Just tell us a little bit more about what digitalization looks like over at the FAA. And I think that's a good jumping off point there. Take it away, Jan.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the panel. I appreciate it. And I can follow along with Michael's conversation about DevOps because we are trying to adapt to a DevOps environment with air traffic systems development, which is the part of the FAA that I sit in within the air traffic organization. And the question for me is, how do I develop an organization of people that's sufficient to carry out the mission, that can grab onto this new environment as it changes and make the most of it, right? So adaptive is a very wonderful word. And it's certainly a huge part of it. What we want to do is continue to attract that next generation of workers. Those are the folks that are driving our teams as they come in. We're a team sport over here. And whenever they come in, they have to learn to wear several different hats. And but what they bring with them in terms of ideas about how to get things done and tools to use to do that is something that we really need to embrace. So having a diverse group of people come to work for us that can bring their own tool sets and ideas to the DevOps conversation and to the communications infrastructure and to the air traffic operations systems is critical. So if a great employee has a growth mindset and you want them to ask questions, we are going to rely on helping managers do their jobs extremely well so that they have time to listen to those questions and to grow the capabilities that we need for the future.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Jan. And Ron, we heard in a great, very insightful keynote that you gave just a while ago, some of the broad points of digital transformation over at NASA. But some of the points that Jan made, I think are great to piggyback off on there. You had mentioned that there is, a new younger generation coming into NASA and expecting, they are digital natives and they expect digital tools. Why don't you just speak more on that point?
Sure, great, and great question. So I'll sort of channel our previous panel where Mitch from the IRS mentioned this about the people, right? People being our greatest asset, and we definitely believe that it is in our core culture of our agency, and it's who we believe. We are. You look at the Fed score, we are the highest agency to work in throughout government, but that doesn't mean we can rest on our laurels just because of that one survey, right? So what it means to us, and I'll just use Jan as sort of a, she mentioned the work over at FAA, what we're doing for flight. Well, the first A in NASA is aeronautics. So Jan, I'm going to pull on our urban air mobility, which we're calling advanced air mobility now in our new program, and really talk to you about what that world is going to look like in the future and how our people play a really predominant role in us getting there, right? So we're seeing a future in our research side of the house where we have absolutely, if you can just envision the Jetsons, right? Flying cars. We're seeing a point in the very near future where we see Ubers flying around the metropolitan area. So we'll take DC as a city where that becomes routine. So that's thinking differently, right? That is in a different mindset, three-dimensional flight and in less controlled environment than we currently have right now, and where commercial partners can actually run the different transports for this. But this requires us to think differently, not only as an agency, not only as an aeronautics community, but as a culture, of who we are. So it requires us to think differently, right? It requires us to think digital native, and we have to, we have about a 5-generation workforce in NASA right now. We have actually, folks that have been here, 30, 40 years that have come up in the classical way of doing things. And then we have the new millennial generation that expects us to work in a different way. So what we're doing is making sure we take really detailed assessments about what our needs are, and absolutely looking at this next generation and how they work, and give them the less constraints in which to work for as we had 20 years ago as well. So empower them to set the priorities, to set the capabilities, to set the functionality, and look across the agency as one agency. So we're really enabling how we work, and that culture and workforce, as I mentioned in the keynote, is one of our key thrust areas. So that enablement is a bidirectional channel. It's not a one channel in. We do want to hear from this next generation, and we want them there to plan what this looks like for us.
Ron, you had so many good points there, and you really had me at flying cars. If you want people to pay attention, you really throw the flying cars a card down. And
well, thank you, Jordan. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I thought you would like that little advanced air mobility example.
You don't hear it every day, and so really gets people paying attention. So, Michael, turning it over to you. Of course, we're hearing more from the vendor side of things, but I think a worthwhile to frame the question for you would just be, if you zoom out and you look, federal wide, if you look government wide, what have you been seeing? Certainly we've been all, like I said, dealing with a new normal with mandatory telework and things of that nature. But what are you seeing as far as big shifts, big trends when it comes to what you're seeing? What are you seeing as far as needs from the federal workforce?
Yeah. I'll just point out that he gave the example of flying cars over DC, which is probably the most restricted airspace in the nation. So that'll be a very interesting challenge when that does come to happen. But to your question and to your point, I think as something we've definitely seen at Red Hat, but we also see kind of across the industries and the partners and the agencies that we work with, is that there's an understanding of quality of life and how quality of life has changed for people given the pandemic, not only in regards to being able to see friends or family, or not being able to see friends or family, or having young ones in the house, or older ones in the house that you have to take care for and that you have to protect. But also, I think what really has started to resonate for me is this idea of adopting this new way of working is about improving people's quality of life, right? And it's about making the workers happier. Going back to that example of change failure rate that I gave during my presentation, and then low performers being somewhere from 46% to 60%, and higher performers being 0 to 15%. I mean, when I worked in operations, the last thing that you wanted to do was go in and figure out why a deploy failed or why a change failed, and then have to go back through the rollback mechanisms. And especially if we've made a database change, then it gets even more hairier about how we're going to roll that back. And then we're being interrupted during dinner with my kids and special moments like that. This idea that DevOps can really improve the quality of life for our knowledge workers I think is really important, and especially as we think about federal agencies and also public sector employees, making sure that they have a high job satisfaction so that we can keep these people in these agencies and working at these agencies and satisfied with their jobs, I think is one of the trends that I've been seeing.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Michael. And I'll throw this out to really anyone who wants to take a first crack at it. But we've heard so much about just in this mandatory telework environment. We've seen so much about onboarding employees virtually, agencies. The mission still continues, and bringing employees on is certainly no exception. I'm wondering if anyone would maybe want to walk through some of the lessons learned in doing that, and maybe drilling down into another level of how has training gone, or how's that onboarding process been in this virtual environment, having people not set foot in the office. How is that going, and where do things go from here?
Nobody jump in too quickly. We had our issues. We definitely had issues. We want to be respectful of the security environment that we're in and make sure that people are able to secure their connections. They weren't able to do that without coming into the office in person. So that's just one example of many, many steps that our IT folks had to work through to try to successfully onboard people with access to the tools that they needed to be able to train and even participate in ZoomGov meetings, for instance, and let alone put their time and attendance in. So it's been challenging, and we've worked through it. Everybody just keeps trying to continue to improve the process, because you're right, we're both onboarding and offboarding employees at this time. Anybody else?
I'm happy to weigh in here, Jory and Jan. I would say that from my perspective, when I'm with the teams that I'm working in, I've seen some new team members get onboarded remotely during the time that we've been working from wherever, whenever, with whatever device. And I think that, we all likely faced similar challenges, some more ready than others, but, it's in the end not that hard to ship a laptop across the country and get somebody spun up and transition to virtual training. When the pandemic first hit, I was supporting the agency's effort to migrate the half of the agency to our enterprise-wide talent acquisition system. And we were in the user training part. We had scheduled 15 locations across the country for week-long boot camps for over 600 people to get them trained on this new technology. And we literally shifted overnight to virtual training, right? So all these people went home with their computers and they dialed into WebExes with the trainer instead. And some of the hiccups there, they wanted 2 screens instead of 1, right? But then as you go through bringing on new employees in that time, it's been really beneficial to have a virtual training option, right? Instead of just an in-person come to DC once every quarter or something like that. And I would say that the department's chief learning officer, Dr. Vicki Brown, and her staff of professionals did a really phenomenal job transitioning lots of training to a virtual environment pretty quickly to keep the critical learning going at the department. And that included onboarding training, which was never more, I guess, important than it was during the time when you didn't have a home base to come and see the people that you're working with. But I got to know our new team members through these virtual collaboration technologies, and maybe we're more likely to call each other than we would have been to walk down the hall and visit each other at our desks. So there are some definite silver linings to this.
So Rory, I just want to touch on, and Rob and Jan, really good examples. Even though we're doing this, I think early in the pandemic, we saw an opportunity. So that's air quotes, an opportunity if you're listening to this not visually. So a lot of our processes early on required a manual touch. It required, Robin mentioned about provisioning equipment and getting equipment out. It was good because when we were in person and not virtually, it was a really high touch. It was really a good customer experience. Everybody came into the office, and once you went through orientation, somebody did the next step, and it was really, really high touch and high value and a connection. So go to early on in April timeframe where we had to do that virtually. We saw opportunities where we had to digitally sign documents that we had to. So in some cases early on, even though we were starting to close our locations down due to the virus and the local reaction to in all of our centers to it, we were closing our locations down and didn't allow people to go in, but yet we were still saying go in. So we needed a quick way to quickly go from that high touch, high value and bring in automation, bring in a digital solution. And we looked all the way through our end-to-end process to see where we could limit that touch, where we could bring in tools, capabilities, functionalities remotely to use. Even though we're doing it, I think we're learning a lot from it. We're getting better. The provisioning, like you mentioned, Robin, getting equipment out to folks and direct shipment, from their suppliers is definitely improving. It wasn't painless for us, but we learned a lot. And I think that really opened up our aperture to say, all right, what other work besides onboarding can we really introduce automation in that manual process? So, and if you remember, the process automation is one of our early thrusts that we're looking at investing in. And, so that is really our story, a lot better than it was. Not perfect by any means, but we're learning from each other and getting better.
Yeah, and I like what you said there, Ron, of how it really teaches you the art of the possible. And then it really, like you were forced to do this. You had to find a way to get around this. We found innovative ways to overcome this situation. But what it really does is it teaches your organization that it is possible. And for years, we probably have been having someone throw wrenches of like, we can't do that, we can't do that, we can't do that. Well, now we have to do it. And now we have to find new ways of working and new ways of behaving. And then it kind of just opens up the door in my perspective.
Yeah, all good points all around there. And Ron, we'll certainly get to that in a little bit. The automating of manual processes and the value add that brings. But I do want to change gears here a little bit and get into something that certainly is relevant to this conversation, and that is the very buzzy topic of reskilling and upskilling and everything that goes along with it. I mean, the topic of the panel is workforce transformation, and of course that goes part and parcel with IT transformation. If we want agencies to take on things like DevOps or take on things like AI or you name it, having a workforce that has the skills that can take these things on. I'll again throw it out to the panel and whoever wants to take it on. Where do you see perhaps the low-hanging fruit when it comes to rescaling or upscaling? And maybe as a corollary to that, what skills are in demand?
I have a lot to say on the topic of reskilling and upskilling, so I'll jump in here. I'll start by saying that I've been researching, learning, meeting colleagues in this space for a couple of years since the rhetoric about reskilling and upskilling came out. And I came to Department of the Interior with a very strong vision that reskilling is not a one and done notion. Rather, continuously updating our skills so that we can continue to be relevant and employable is the culture shift we need to make in the federal workforce and the workforce at large. So my platform essentially is that we often focus on reskilling as an occupational series is going to go away in its entirety. And in order to prevent a lot of people being out of work, we need to put programs in place to reskill them for a particular future occupation. And I'll say that in my experience, I haven't seen a lot of really specific examples of that happening. Rather, I believe what we're seeing is that the occupation persists, the work persists, the ways in which the work is done changes. That's below the competency level, that's at the skill level. And in order to really tackle this notion of the world of work that my children will be working in, what strengths they will need and how those strengths help build a team on a particular project or things like that, we really need to start looking at our human capital workforce and work data from a skills lens. And so that we can be more dynamic in the way that we're trying to think about reskilling and redeploying. So right now, that's a scary thing to say to people. We're going to need to reskill and redeploy you to a new topic. But when you look at things like the World Economic Forum reports and what the majority of leaders are saying are going to be emerging skill sets that are going to be needed, they're saying things like critical thinking, analysis, self-management, resiliency, right? These are things that if you looked at competencies in the 300 occupational series across the government are going to be broadly applicable and already in place. That really lowers the barrier of scariness to the workforce, because now we're talking about transferable strengths that can take you into a number of different places where you can work and then tackle the technical learning. And when we talk about technical learning, I'm not talking about a 6-month reskilling program either. I'm talking about going on YouTube and figuring out how to play audio in Teams while you're making a presentation, right? I mean, there are little things that are transformative already that if we just get used to that kind of change, that we're always going to be learning toward the next thing. I'll pause there.
Awesome.
Thanks, Robin. I think I'd like to jump in on where you left off in terms of you've got a very strong picture of broadly, and I totally agree. And in the down and in look at that, how do you really make that work? We have huge opportunities. They're big losses, right? We're going to lose 50% of our workforce very soon. It is coming. And whenever that happens, we have to have brought in people with different skill sets and different backgrounds and tons of diversity. So we are literally investing everything we can into interns, bringing them in on longer term appointments, not summer internships, but long-term appointments that allow them the opportunity to make a place for themselves, where they come in and have very project-based expectations during their time with their teams, and they're making substantial contributions and they're getting job offers as a result. Those people, not only are they transforming us for the future because they're becoming part of our organization, but they're transforming the team that they're on and changing the mindset of the people who are already there, so that the workforce has a view to this new set of skills and has somebody on the team that helps them with that. So the idea of bringing in people with different perspectives and a different level of experience is very compelling for us, and right now it's working quite well. So love that. Thank you.
So I'll foot stomp both Robin and Jan here. Absolutely agree with the skill sets needed, but I'm going to sort of take a different angle at this. Absolutely agree with those points, and I'm gonna touch on FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and that's how people really internalize the change, and how they've, especially the workforce that's been in place. I'm not sure how much this really applies for somebody coming into the workforce, because they really don't have that anchoring point, but specifically for folks that have been in place for a while, they've been successful. They know how they were trained. They know what they've learned from others to do their job, but it will change. I think, the absolute, the critical thinking, the absolute, what we're seeing in data scientists, that skill sets, starting with data first, that all those are absolutely right. But what does it mean for specifically the workforce that's been in place for a while, right? What does it mean for them to change and adopt to this new way? And I think as leaders, you really have to take time to say, what is that? Explain that change, explain the case for why that's being done, and for everybody to see that they have value, that they have a place, and they will be absolutely celebrated, and they have, you know, they have a job. Because if you don't have that and people feel off kilter, off balance, you know, you'll lose a lot of that historical knowledge that Jan was just talking about. And when 50% of the workforce does, you know, a lot of that knowledge will walk out and not be captured, you know. So really looking at that FUD aspect and explain that change and why we're doing that, and for folks to see where they fit in that is really utmost important, in addition to what both Jan and Robin just mentioned.
Excellent. And Michael, from your perspective in industry, you know, a unique perspective on this, where do you see the low-hanging fruit for agencies to reskill their workforces?
Yeah, well, more kind of piling on what was said about the interns and bringing them in for more longer term. You know, when you think about bringing in the next generation workforce, what's also important is understanding what technologies you're using. And if you're using, you know, more modern stacks, more modern applications, then the next generation is going to be more willing to choose public sector over, you know, commercial, or commercial and public sector being held in the same regard. You know, people are going to want to work with Kubernetes. People are going to want to work with serverless. People are going to want to work with event-driven architectures, AI, ML, and things like that. And so really understanding that bringing these technologies in are not just about, you know, the digital transformation we're trying to achieve, but also modernizing our platforms so that we can modernize our workforce as well, and giving people the tools and technologies that they want to use.
Great. And Jan, I actually wanted to circle back on a point you made regarding the workforce and the imperative to do all of this. You mentioned 50% of the workforce being on the line here. Just to drill down on that a little bit further, are we just talking about that in terms of retirement eligibility, the age of the workforce, or what's the picture of the FAA workforce at this point?
Well, I'm focused on a small segment of the FAA workforce, so not speaking to the entire agency. But I think that in any case, we'd be at about 40%. That is a retirement number. We've been looking at a 40% wave at least for the last five years. We've been looking at a 5 to 10 year outlook of losing half the workforce. And events and disruptions tend to keep people around longer. So it's not a hard number. I picked 50 because it could be 40 in some places and it could be 60 in others. And honestly, in my small organization, it was 60 just a couple of years ago. And the only way we improved it was by bringing in interns to learn those important jobs. So others may have more perspective for a broader government or for their own agencies. I'll turn it over.
Yeah, so I think, Troy, there was a piece, and I'm looking on my other machine here to bring it up. Mike Halsey just did a piece today on this, in fact, that really amplified, you know, sort of what Jan is saying. And I think that is the case. I don't want to quote exact number for where we are, but we're pretty much in alignment, very close to that. But that's a good piece if others really want to pull on this. And I think he talked to Kathy Troutman about this as well. So that's a really good piece to draw on, really to explain this a little bit deeper in a broader sense too.
Yeah. If I may, I'd like to pull a thread on this conversation about the retirement eligible workforce. It is high. It's high in the IT management profession too, and here at the Department of the Interior. And though it's high, like Jan said, we have seen people who are retirement eligible for almost 20 years now, right? I'll put my mother in that group of not yet ready to retire and still fully capable, right? And so I think that two things about this. One, as we look to shift our way of thinking about how we resource work and we get more flexible with our resource models, there's a place for retirement eligible people to continue contributing even as the world of work changes. And then that knowledge loss might be a little bit smaller as a result. And some of those, we have to peel back the layers of the onion of the human resources regulations in the federal government, but there are ways to do it today. And then the second part of pulling the thread on this part of the conversation is that as we look to unlock the data on human capital and workforce and work, and we look to reskill and redeploy, we need to think more broadly about where we're looking to reskill and redeploy from, because the federal workforce is a limited pool, right? And so one of the efforts that I've been engaged in at the department is to make our career data transparent to the public as well, so that we can recruit more interns, so that members of the American public can see what it would take to be eligible, minimally qualified for a particular occupation, or maybe what's near them in their local geographic area, which becomes less and less important unless you're doing some of our on the ground public service activities. But I do think that there are lots of different ways that we can begin to look at the resource models of the future and how we might solve for some of the turnover and retention goals that we have by doing that differently.
Awesome. Yeah, making sure that those career pathways are available to the public and they can get a better sense of, like you said, what's out there and what they could potentially apply to. While we're on the topic of data, Ron, you do have an interesting perspective here, having that CDO hat on, and you had mentioned it earlier as far as giving the workforce the tools they need, making them equipped to handle data and leverage data in a strategic fashion. I'm wondering if you could maybe walk through more of that, since we are talking about reskilling and how that could be a game changer over at NASA.
Yeah, we're partnered very close with our HR side of the house, our Chico environment, and they have data analytics capability that they're growing within that domain. And I'll just give you a couple quick examples of what we're doing. The Evidence Act requires us to have an assessment of data awareness, data literacy. So we're going to do that assessment through as every federal organization is going to do in compliance with the Act. But we're working very closely with them to go a bit further as well. So we want early in the pandemic, we saw through our leave usage, and we were able to grab into our leave and earning system and to see if people were taking off and they weren't, and where our projections of use or lose leave were, and what that vulnerability was specifically around December, when everybody had to take off for use or lose. So we were very early on, maybe April, May timeframe, we really saw that data, and we encouraged folks to take care of themselves, take care of their families, take the time off, even though they couldn't go anywhere. You can't go on, leave the home and everything, but it's important to unplug. So that awareness piece is something we grabbed through our data systems or through authoritative sources systems. That awareness was very, very critical for that. And then I'll just give you another quick example about our process transformation. We are encouraging folks that actually are doing things now. What would they like to see to be automated, changed, improved, maybe a step reduced out of a process, or maybe an entire process completely eliminated? So we want their input into what we do and how we're strategically going after. So we're doing really ideation sessions where we do get our journey map done for our work, and involve them in that mapping, and involve the people into the prioritization of what we do. So that is better buy-in. We're seeing a better product out of it. We're seeing a better adoption rate of what we're doing because of the inclusiveness of it. So we are encouraging this to be a bi-directional, really alignment of what we're doing for our work and our workforce itself. So there are two good examples I can give you right there, George.
Awesome. Yeah. And of course, as you pointed out, these are government-wide kinds of things, CDOs cropping up in all kinds of agencies, and them looking to meet these broad goals under not just the Evidence Act, but the federal data strategy to, as I said earlier, leverage that data and get the most value out of it. Jan, I do want to pivot the conversation a little bit. We've been talking so much about reskilling, but that's, I guess, only really one half of the coin here. And the other being, I guess, recruiting and retention, which of course, fall neatly into your job title here. I think, just turning the conversation over to that point, what do you see as some of the opportunities as far as not just bringing people into the agency, but how are you able to effectively get them to stick around and find a career in the FAA?
Thank you. That's a great question. And one we ask every day, right, to make sure that we're staying on track. Certainly the outreach and the personal touch is more challenging right now. This is very down and in, this is very manager centric. So we're trying to free up managers' time by automating and providing one-pagers that help managers do their job better, to get the admin part of management out of the way as it relates to employees, and have them focus more on developmental conversations, coaching and mentoring conversations, and encouraging employees to find ways to grow. To get at those conversations that managers and have with other employees, so mentoring conversations where leaders challenge employees to find ways to grow themselves, to ask questions, to reach out to people that are in your stakeholder organization, where you may feel, especially right now, that there's a barrier to communicating. This is really personal. It's about reaching people and identifying with them and helping them along. Very not easy to do when every manager, I think, that I know is a technical manager. They're there because they were really great at that technical job, and leadership wanted them to do more of that. And now, in this challenging time, and truly as we evolve to bring in the next generation of the workforce, we have to be more personally involved with our employees. And again, trying to move processes out of managers' way so that they can spend quality time with people, and then be intentional about building a structure in which managers can do that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I think a point that often doesn't get brought up in these kinds of venues. Just throwing that out to the rest of the panel here, would anyone else want to speak to maybe, I don't know if this is the right way to put it, but maybe some of the soft skills that are so critical to management and making this kind of culture change work as effectively as possible?
I agree with Jan. This is a time when people who have their plates full have a little bit more to put on their plate to do that personal outreach to their team members and make sure everybody's okay, and spend a few minutes at the beginning of meetings just sort of sharing stories so we know each other, because we don't see each other in the office kitchen or anything like that. And I would say that from my experience at the Department of Interior, I think our leadership has done a really phenomenal job of encouraging employees to come together as a team, sort of informally, and not talk about work, but to just talk about life and through our collaboration tools. And I think that goes a long way in building relationships. And one of my, I guess, stark realizations moving to a remote way of work is that you really can build some solid relationships virtually, remotely, with team members from wherever they are. And actually it's a little bit deeper because you know a little bit more about them. So we had our office little holiday get together remotely yesterday. And we were sharing some of the things we were thankful for. And I just thank the team for supporting me being a mom with 2 kids doing virtual school here at home. And sometimes I'm giving a presentation and it's music class. So we're just having to be a little bit more human and accepting and patient with each other. And wouldn't you know, we're all still absolutely accomplishing all the goals and metrics we set out to accomplish.
Yeah, I think one thing I would add in around, the soft skills for a manager, and I think not only for a manager, but for anyone in an organization, is empathy. And I feel like in the DevOps world, we've talked about empathy for a while, and empathizing with our users, empathizing with our developers, empathizing with operations and what they have to go through. But I think now all of us can empathize with everybody because we're all in some way going through the exact same thing. I think that's been kind of the interesting part of the last 9 months or so, is having this joint idea of empathy and how far it can go.
Yeah, all good points. And I guess changing gears here yet again. We had talked about this a little bit. Ron, I think you particularly had mentioned this, but looking at this conversation from the perspective of automation and really looking at the value proposition of what can we take off people's plates, right? Whether it's those one pagers for managers, what can we, what time can we free up in a manager's time in a manager's day to do higher order tasks? And the same goes for other employees in the agency, right? What manual tasks, what rote tasks can we do that can be streamlined, can be automated, can be taken off your plate to do those higher order tasks? Again, I'll throw out to everyone, where do you see the low hanging fruit for that kind of automation?
Yeah, so I'll take a bridge between the previous question and this one, Jory, if I could. So one thing we're seeing, one soft skill we're seeing is this environment, this virtual environment right now, are giving people an equal voice. So we've heard stories where in the past, if it were an in-person meeting, you have your folks at the principal's table that sit there, and then you have your backstoppers that sit at the back. Well, in a virtual environment now, everybody has the mute button. You can turn it off, you can speak. So it becomes a great equalizer. So we're seeing absolutely areas of empowerment to the people. And this is a soft skill. Everybody has a voice, everybody can be heard. So we're seeing this as a really good, a good thing. And folks aren't just hiding back, turning the cameras off. They're engaged, they're leaning into the conversation, whether virtually. So that empowerment is really good. Now, when it comes to absolutely taking a look at what we're doing manually and the process we're doing manually, I'm going to go back to the why and really have to explain the why. We've had conversations with even our budget analysts. Well, I keep a separate spreadsheet, and it tells me this. I need to track that. Well, what are you doing, and can we put what you're doing into a system, an automated way that everybody can do it? So it takes the individual out, puts it into a way where others can back you up, but working differently, I think, and explaining why we're doing this and what do we want to achieve out of it. Now, from that individual, that quick example, you can say, hey, it's not dependent on bringing you off your leave when you have to open your own spreadsheet up. That function is in the system and others can see it. So you don't have to be taking time away from your family, coming off leave to answer one question that if it were in there. So that mindset, that change, a way of always working that way to what does it mean to me? And I'm still valued, I'm still needed, but you're not bringing me off leave to answer these things that it could be done within an automated way. So that's a real quick example. And there are tons of it that we see throughout what we do. I think NASA, we do celebrate our people. Absolutely. We value our people. Absolutely. But actually doing things a little bit differently in a way that you're not going to be devalued if you are transparent, you are disclosing information that you're doing. I think we're working on that. We're getting better on that. It's not perfect, but that different way of thinking, Troy, is really key for us to get to that next evolution we need to make.
Say that some of what I've seen that absolutely supports what Ron is saying. And I said earlier, the fire's on the doorstep, right? So we just got shoved into a time where we all needed each other to back us up, right? And where the benefit of having a single system that other people can share work in so that we can maybe recruit and hire and share certificates more broadly across the agency is not something we have a hard sell at anymore in the last 6 to 8 months, for example. And so the longer we practice using the tools and technologies that have always been available to us, but we just didn't really need to or want to use at the time, the more it will become just habit. It's the new way we work, right? But I do think that this is an example. This is a little pilot test of how we prove value to people and show that their job isn't going to go away by just having more transparency and sharing of the work that they do. But rather that transparency and sharing of work allows us to tag team things and to get to that higher order work that we've never had a big enough pizza pie plate to fit the 18-inch pie on when we're doing, we're only doing the 12 inches of work. So I think that to that end, the value proposition for the things that we are trying to continue to promote in the space of digital workforce transformation needs to continue to focus on the ability to back each other up, not that, we need access to that information in case you hit the lottery, right? It's really about working better together in teams, which we might value more now.
Great. Yeah. And, I will throw it to the questions that we've been getting here in the Q&A box. And this kind of gets back to one of the earlier points in the conversation. What jobs, if any, must be done at the office versus remotely? That's certainly a capability that I believe, most agencies have had to think about in a different way with the past couple of months, 9 months actually. I'll throw that out to the panel. How have your agencies rethought that whole dichotomy?
So for us, we do have roles that need to be in person. We have flights. We need folks in firing rooms to make sure we launch. So there are roles that we're building, our rocketry, that we are building things manually. What we've done is very early in the pandemic, classify those roles and made sure the absolute necessity was on site and needed to be physically in the space. We have physical assets we need to make sure that are safe. Land we need to protect, right? So there are a good percentage of our jobs that require that in person, but that's not everybody, right? So we really took a look at the functions and took a look at who needed to be there, made sure they were protected, made sure they were safe, and continue to do that. Right now, we're in an environment where the cases are increasing, and we're back into that April timeframe again. So. But we're taking a smart look at this, making the right decisions, and protecting our people.
And at the Department of the Interior, we employ people in occupations in almost every occupation that's in the Occupational Series Handbook, the federal government. And so we're talking about a mix of office jobs and really front-facing land jobs, right? Parks, wildfire management, right? We still had to handle the fires. And so it's impossible to talk about what each example did, but I will say that I know that there was a lot of work from the side of human capital, safety and management, leadership across the department that really focused specifically on the cases of who really needs to be there in person. And if they really need to be there in person, what kinds of extra precautions can we put in place to protect those teams that are together in person? And then what kinds of things can we do to help them ease sort of the mental burden of that through hazard pay and things of that nature? And then from my perspective, being in one of those jobs where I can almost be more effective at home than by going to the office, because the people I talk to are across the country and in different time zones. I mean, maximum flexibility. So I'm really quite pleased with the way when there's a need, people respond, right? And I think they absolutely did that during the time of this pandemic. And it's it's similar, the work at the Department of Interior, you can think of it similar to state and local governments, where you still have to have people collecting the trash and the recycling and making sure the water's working and all of that stuff. So we don't all have the same experience, but we can all be met where we're at by our leadership.
All right, great. And maybe, I see Tom's popping up here, so I know we're getting close to time, but, maybe one last question, one last closing sentiment here to really put a bow on the whole conversation. Really brings back a point that was mentioned earlier by Ron, but I'll throw it out to the rest of the panelists. What's a good way to encourage your workforce to avoid that burnout, as we were talking about earlier? Encourage people to take off the time that they need, and to Robin's point just a moment ago, being flexible and accommodating their needs while at the same time meeting the mission.
That's a tough one. I'll jump in. It's really just in those conversations, you just have to talk about what they will get out of it, right? No, you can't take a trip. Maybe there isn't an option to go out of your home wherever you are, but you do have an opportunity to take a break. And so focusing on, for our teams, folks tend to be very objective oriented. And so what they can get out of it tends to be a good place to start in terms of encouraging the behavior that you're hoping that people will grab onto. You really want people to be mentally refreshed and present for their work, and you don't want people burning themselves all the way down in order to meet the mission. We're more than meeting the mission because everyone is showing up. They're showing up many more hours a day than they did before and getting lots done. And we're really showing them appreciation for that, acknowledging that, and then saying, okay, time to take a break.
And I'll say that there was a time in my professional career where I was pretty sure I wore a badge because I never took time off. And that was like a thing to be proud of, right? And as our work and life environments integrate more, and we have to adjust mentally and physically to integrating these things, I think that we need to start giving people badges for taking more regular breaks, so that they can stay mentally aware and focused and healthy.
All right, very good. Well, I think that's a strong note to end on, unless anyone else wants to throw anything else out for that question. But panelists, thanks again for taking the time. And this has been a great conversation. Thank you to the audience for hanging in there, even with the snow that's going on outside of all of our windows. And Tom, I'll throw it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jory. And Michael, we want a "Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls" shirt. Where do we get those? So we got a couple people texted me. We're gonna have to get those.
I don't know if they're publicly for sale. So this is actually the only Red Hat branded shirt that I've been able to get.
Okay.
Mainly because of the pandemic.
I'll have to use all my connections that I have over there. We'll talk to the marketing people and see what we can do.
But Tom, now I can't get the song out of my head. So Michael, shame.
Yeah, that's not one I really want floating around there. That's like kind of back in the day. Well, thank you all. On that note, thank you all. That was very enjoyable and got a lot out of that, and I think everybody else did. So we are going to, right before we close the program, I need to introduce my working group project manager, Kirsten Patton. Hi, Kirsten.
Hi, thank you.
You got the company girl thing going on there. Wow, that's kind of nice. Wow, where'd you get that? That's like the last in-person event. But Yeah, Kirsten's going to go over our working group, how we work a little bit. It'll just take a few minutes, but we wanted to go over that. Thank you, Kirsten.
Yes, of course. Thank you guys for hanging out. I hope everyone's enjoying their snow day. I just have a few slides that I want to go over to kind of explain what it is that we're trying to achieve with this new digital transformation working group here at ATARC. So if you give me 1 second, I'm going to share my screen with you all. Let's see, I'll put that into view presenter mode. Okay, so if you would like to reach me for any further questions after this presentation, there is my email. You can reach out that way. I'm also on Twitter and LinkedIn, and there's my Twitter handle where I try my best to keep up to date with all the different working group projects that we have going on. But let's just jump right into the digital transformation working group. So this working group, it will be held as meetings bi-weekly on Fridays from 9 to 9:45 Eastern time. The first official meeting for digital transformation is going to be after the holidays on January 8th at that time. And the project teams that make up this working group are going to have a cadence of bi-weekly sessions that meet for 30 minutes every other week. We like to keep them quick because I know everybody is death by Zoom these days. So we don't want to take up too much of your time. And we really just use these sessions as sort of a touch base point to discuss, what work has been done throughout the project teams over the past 2 weeks and what type of work that we're going to be accomplishing over the next 2 weeks. Each project team is made up of at least one government chair, one industry chair, and one academic or advisory chair, though we do have co-chairs within each project team as well. And below are the project teams that will be making up what the digital transformation working group at ATARC is. So as you can see, we have quite a few. And leading up to this launch, some of the project teams have already met. They've already sort of discussed what their deliverables will look like. They've already had an opportunity for the chairs to meet and sort of get to know one another so that over the holidays, they can mull over the different topics that were discussed and the different initiatives that they may want to achieve. And then some of the project teams have already been meeting for quite some time now. So mobile security being one of them, they are working on FISMA metrics for 2021, and they meet bi-weekly on Fridays at 10 a.m. Workforce transformation, which is led by Robin Reese, who we just heard on from the panel prior to this. Their meetings will be held bi-weekly on Thursdays, and so on and so forth. So I won't go through the entire list because we can share this slide deck out after we send the wrap-up emails so that you can look things over as well. But these are some of the different project teams that will be making up the working group. And I also had a note from one of our hyper automation project team chairs that she would like to conduct interviews for government leadership within this project team. So that's something that we'll be working on over the break so that we can get that started when we jump into our next meeting as an official project team. So these are the different teams for you to look at. And then I just wanted to share with you who some of the government leadership is going to be on this working group. Some familiar faces. We heard from Mitch and we heard from Ron Thompson, of course, earlier today. So this makes up the leadership. I'll be meeting with them separate so that we can kind of go over the different project team initiatives and make sure everyone is on the right track. But then my next slide will show the project team government chairs for these teams, or at least some of them. And again, you'll see some familiar faces like Robin and Amber. Amber will be leading the customer experience project team. Robin will be leading workforce transformation. Melvin Brown over at SBA is leading IT mod, and then Dave Harris at DOI, he leads mobile security. Richie Balkasoon, workforce transformation, and Cheryl Jenkins on our identity management project team. So I just wanted to share some of the folks that you'll be able to interact with if you choose to join our digital working group here at ATARC. And on my next slide, I just wanted to sort of list out an overview of the different types of deliverables that these teams produce. So they can range anywhere from webinars. I think since COVID hit, we've done about 40 just the webinar or the working groups alone. Podcasts, we have a number of series already producing episodes on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. We bring in lots of speakers to our sessions so that we can learn from one another. White papers is another deliverable that these project teams tend to produce. So these are just sort of the different projects that you can get involved with if you choose to join. As a member, you can participate, or if you choose to come in and take on more of a chair leadership position, because we're still looking for more chairs to round out our project teams. And I just wanted to finish up by sharing with you some of the benefits of joining these working groups and project teams and getting involved with ATARC as an organization. It allows for lots of networking between government and industry. You'll have access to federal market intelligence and market research. This provides an opportunity for career advancement, professional development. You get exposure to emerging technologies that are out there, first-hand insight into government challenges, and brand recognition at our ATARC events and websites. So those are just a few of the benefits that you'll receive from joining ATARC. We are always looking to, grow and expand our community of government, industry, and academia. So I really hope that you'll reach out to me, and I'll put it back on the first slide so that you can get my email address. But if you reach out to me directly, I'd be happy to have a one-on-one meeting with you, and we can decide together, where you think you might best fit in and what role you'd like to play. And thank you all for hanging in there for the last couple minutes of this event.
No, thank you, Kirsten. I'd just like to thank you and the rest of my team. Boy, what a year that we've had. Crazy town. And I'd like to thank everybody for hanging in there. And this is our last official event of 2020. I don't even know how to describe that, how many things we've done this year, but we're looking forward to 2021. And please take some time off, throw some snowballs, build a snowman, shovel. Be careful shoveling your sidewalks, especially when you're like me on the wrong side of 50. So definitely be careful. We've got a whole bunch of summit kickoffs for our other 4 working groups next year. And we're going to start the year off strong. We've got a lot of things going on with the next administration coming in. And enjoy the rest of your day. And if we don't see you, enjoy your whole holiday. Thank you.